Right. Okay, everybody. Welcome to the Fairbanks Museum's weekly update with me, Bobby Farley Trivio, about what's going on in the night sky. This is the first time I'm hosting this on Zoom live without the help of Leela or Drew. So please be kind to me if things go wrong. I'm not sure if everything is working perfectly, but I think we're live on both YouTube and on Zoom. And this is going to be archived at the Fairbanks Museum's website as well. But tonight does not look like a good night for stargazing. It's been cloudy and gloomy and threatening rain all day. But of course, the things I talk about will work for many weeks to come. So if you haven't already downloaded it, get the software called Stellarium. Stellarium.org is a free software that works on Macs, Windows, and even Linux computers. And it allows you to visualize the night sky. I use it here, and you can use it to follow along or also plan ahead for a night when you know you're going to be outside to see what's going to be in the sky. So let me get Stellarium going here. And I'll share the screen with all of you wonderful folks out there. Feel free, if you are online and you have a way to ask a question, I would love to answer it. So if you're in our Zoom meeting, you are welcome to use the chat function or the Q&A function at any moment if you'd like to send me a question. However, this is what the sky looks like now, and I'm glad to say that in Stellarium, the night sky, the landscape around the night sky finally is matched by what's going on outside. I started doing these when there were no leaves on the trees, so this looked a little bit wishful, but now it really looks like that as we're almost in summer. And next week, I'll be talking a lot more about the summer solstice if you are curious about that. But I wanted to talk about what's going to happen after the sun sets tonight. So in Stellarium, you click on an object, and if you hit the space bar, you can center the screen on that object, and that allows you to track it through the sky. And tonight's sunset is going to be at 8:32. Think about that. It's not going to get dark until 10 p.m. This is a tough time of year for kids with early bedtimes, I always say. If they have to get to bed before 10, they're going to miss all the stars. So maybe they can do some extra chores or mow the lawn or do some laundry to earn the privilege of staying up later than usual, as you would have to during the summer months if you want to stay up and see the night sky. So I've hit the L function, the button L allows you to fast forward through time, and I fast forwarded it to about 6:30, an hour before, 8:30, exactly at sunset. But that tree is going to be a problem. Many of you remember that we were watching Mercury in the sky last week and before that. But if you want to find Mercury now, oh, it's getting tough. You probably have lost your chance. You're going to see that by the time Mercury becomes visible, it's going to be so low on the horizon that you probably won't be able to see it at all. Let's see if I can simulate that for you now. Oh, is that it? Yes. So Mercury is never easy to see, but last week it was easier than it usually is. And this week it's going to be very hard unless you're high up on a mountain, high elevation, looking over the west with not a lot of obstacles. You probably won't get a chance to see Mercury anymore, but I wanted to mention it just because we were following its progress. And earlier in the year, we were following Venus, which is now poised to become the morning star, as it's one of its identities. And you'd be seeing it in the morning before the sun rises. But right now, you're not really going to see many planets in the evening. But I will show you that if you are willing to stay up till past midnight, you're going to see quite a show that's going to dominate our summer sky. So let's put things back the way they're supposed to be. This is early twilight, a little after 9 o'clock. Yes, after 9 p.m. and it'll still be this bright out. So let's finish the sunset. And although their season is long gone, you can still see the head of the Gemini twins. And that star Capella, part of Auriga constellation, that's a star that always stays in our sky. And in the summer, it's always low on the horizon. I've talked about that in previous episodes. It's one of the many reports of UFOs that I get at the Fairbanks Museum on an annual basis. But now that it's dark enough to see most of the stars, the Gemini twins are sinking, and we still have the lovely lion Leo visible in the sky. And right next to Leo is Virgo. That's the constellation of the goddess of the flowers. So you would expect that during the month of June, she should be prime center stage in the middle of the sky, and she sure is. And I've talked in previous episodes about Libra and Scorpius, but notice that now you don't have to wait till very long to see Antares, that red star that's name, it means not Mars in ancient Greek. That star should be visible by the time the sky gets dark. So you already have enough to see the images that can make of a scorpion. Or if you want to go with the traditional indigenous picture from the native culture here in Vermont, from the Abenaki folklore, you can say that it's Champ, at least his upper half with his nose, his eye, and the top of his head with his twin horns. In fact, his Abenaki name, Gitaskog, means the serpent with horns, the horned serpent. So here are his horns and his head. Here's his neck, his red heart right where it should be in the middle of his body, and his humped back. And it's one of the treats of going through the summer, is that every night during the summer we get to see a little bit more of this image, whether you think of it as a scorpion like the ancient Egyptians and other North African cultures did, or if you think of it as the lake monster from Lake Champlain. Either way, that constellation Scorpius is going to be where you want to look for the planets when they arrive in the sky, if you're going to stay up late enough to see them. So here we are around 10 o'clock in the Stellarium virtual sky, and I'm going to fast forward time. Well, maybe before I do that, let me give you a new constellation that I thought I would mention for you in the northern skies. So sorry about that abrupt change of subject, but I promise we will see those planets. But I just remembered that I wanted to cover the husband of Cassiopeia. If you've watched previous episodes of this, you heard me talking about Cassiopeia, the constellation that refers to the Ethiopian empress, the empress of Axum or Abyssinia back in ancient times, who was punished for her hubris by being placed in a chair in the sky that, like those dunking chairs that clowns at the fair sit in, will make sure that she falls out of it as soon as it turns upside down. Well, this time of year, the chair of Cassiopeia looks upright, more or less. If you imagine that this is the top of the chair, and here is the back, and here is the seat where there is a cushy for the queen's tushy right there. And here are the legs of the chair. So I think once you look at it for a while, you really do see the shape of a chair, but you don't see a person sitting in there, at least not in my imagination, but you're welcome to do whatever you'd like with those stars. However, I want to mention the constellation that is her husband in these stories, Cepheus, the king. This is a constellation that's always right next to her. And this drawing in Stellarium, very simplified, does a good job of showing you how I think Cepheus looks. He looks like a house drawn by a kindergartner. You know, at that age, their artistic development is usually that the house is walls and everything is a square with a little triangular roof on top. I even drew houses like that, even though where I lived, houses didn't really look like that growing up in South Florida. Most houses had flat roofs. Nonetheless, that's a very easy image to make with the sky. So if I take those lines out, you can see that next to the throne of the queen, in a sense, right beside her and right above her, this is the star that marks the top of the constellation. But what is it? Well, in my imagination, I don't see the little house as the picture. I actually pretend that this is the head of the king. So this triangle made that would be the roof, if I put that back up, that triangular roof is actually his crown. Quite historically fitting if you look at ancient emperors of Ethiopia and even the last emperor, Haile Selassie, they typically wore conical shaped crowns. So it matches the time and the place of this story. The emperor with his Ethiopian crown, and here's his big square head. I jokingly sometimes say he has a blockhead to make this memorable for my audiences. And if you imagine that that square is his head and this is his crown, then you can even make out these two little stars as eyes and pretend like I do that. Oh, I just found a cool deep space object, but I'm not going to get distracted by that. And over here are the stars that make his goatee. And you can even pretend that he's got like dreadlocks hanging out the back of his head or long braids, some royal hairstyle that his servants spend hours doing every morning. So there, I'm sorry, I have a lot of details that I imagine in these constellations. You may not see all that, but that's what I do when I look at the stars. I see ancient Cepheus, the emperor of Ethiopia, and his wife Cassiopeia facing each other. And I really want everybody who likes constellations to try to familiarize themselves with these stars. Not so much because the fascinating pictures, you may not think it looks so great, but because they are part of the ancient epic story that has the most constellations that I can think of in it. The story of the Princess Andromeda, which is their daughter, a constellation that's not quite visible yet, but if you stay up late, as we're planning on, you'll get to see her. But the legs of the throne of Cassiopeia are usually the guide that I give people to find Andromeda. So by looking at where the legs are pointing, you can see that her constellation has not risen yet. But get to learn Cassiopeia and Cepheus first. And then when Andromeda pops in, you will already know the royal family of Axum. And of course, just a really quick summary of the story, Andromeda is the princess, Cassiopeia is the queen, and Cepheus is the king. And because of Cassiopeia and Cepheus' hubris, the Greek word for the pride that offends the gods, Cassiopeia claimed that she and Andromeda were more beautiful than even the Nereids, the immortal ladies of the sea, who were the daughters of Poseidon or Oceanus, depending on which era of Greek mythology we're talking about. And because they compared their mortal beauty to the beauty of the immortals, Poseidon decided to punish the entire kingdom of Abyssinia for this hubris by sending a sea monster named Cetus to destroy their kingdom. And that sea monster, Cetus, has his own constellation. Well, Andromeda is offered as a sacrifice to Poseidon because he says that's the only way to assuage his temper, is to sacrifice the daughter of the empire, sort of the princess, the first daughter of the entire country, because it was a way to put them back in their place, saying, you thought she was more beautiful than our daughters? Well, we're going to take her from you. She's going to be a sacrifice. Then we'll save your kingdom from the sea monster if you kill Andromeda or let her get eaten by the whale. So that's not really a choice, saving one person or an entire kingdom. So, of course, in the story, Cepheus and Cassiopeia, probably with tears in their eyes, lead their daughter to the beach. They chain her to the rocks and they await the whale that comes to eat her. But if you know anything about great stories, that's not how it ends, because a hero appears in the middle of the story, and his name is Perseus. And Perseus will come to the rescue and save Andromeda from the whale because he has Medusa's head in his possession from a previous hit job that he was assigned by goddess Athena. And with that head in his hand, he uses the powers of Medusa to petrify the whale Cetus. And so he also makes his entry and his escape on the famous flying horse Pegasus. And I can't wait for later in the year when I get to show you all of these constellations, because yes, Pegasus, Cetus, Perseus, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Cepheus, they're all in the sky. And if you add the Nereids as a version of the Pleiades, then you can pretty much tell the whole story with constellations. It's an epic story, and it teaches you so much of the sky. But another thing to think about is that when you learn this story, you're also learning what is considered to be the template for those classic tales. Think about what happens. A princess locked up, chained up somewhere, like Leia in the belly of the Death Star, or Fiona in that tower in Shrek, or Rapunzel, or take your pick, any princess in any story from fairy tales and, hero quests. And she usually faces a threat, a monster, a villain, an evil sorceress, like, in Black Beauty, Maleficent. Well, I know Sleeping Beauty, excuse me, Maleficent. But you understand the template. But then the hero, sometimes a stranger, a foreigner, somebody from another land, in this case, a Greek hero coming to an African empire to rescue the African princess. It's pretty cool. It's an intercontinental love story. It's the template for all those hero stories, including Star Wars and Rapunzel. And so this is why I love this story. You get to know this part of the sky, and you become very familiar with one of the oldest stories known to humanity, thousands of years old. Now, let's move on. So there is Cepheus and Cassiopeia. We're going to keep returning to this part of the sky as summer continues. And I promise I will go on to talk about other constellations. But now I do want to show you, in the time that we have remaining, where the big planets are going to be showing up. Speaking of templates for old stories, you're probably going to get a kick out of this if you like old mythology and modern science fiction too. So there is Antares, not Mars, but the red heart of the Scorpion constellation. That's a bright object that will help you focus your eyes, and also the Milky Way. Now that we have a waning gibbous moon, the moon's not going to rise until about 1 o'clock in the morning tonight. So this is starting to be a good time to look for the Milky Way if the sky is clear. We had a full moon recently last week, so that would have made it hard to see this very delicate part of the sky that is perhaps the most majestic thing you can see on a dark night sky, something that you cannot see under city light pollution. But luckily, here in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, we do not have a lot of light pollution. So the Milky Way is usually very visible to us on a clear night. So as that rises, here comes the first of the planets. Behold, Jupiter, or what the ancient Greeks would have called it, Zeus. Yes, Zeus and Jupiter are the same character in the mythologies, if you know Greek and Roman mythologies, but they're actually the same name, slightly pronounced differently with a different word added. For example, Greeks called their lightning god Zeus, and the Romans called him Zeus Father. But remember that the ancient Greek classical period and the Roman Empire are separated by centuries. I mean, the same amount of centuries that separates me from Shakespeare. So think of how much the English language has changed since the time of Shakespeare, and just imagine how much names and words may have changed from the time of Alexander the Great to the time of Julius Caesar, centuries later. You know, it's a while, and things develop and pronunciations change. But the religion of the Greeks that worship Zeus spread throughout the Greek Empire to Rome and Italy, and the Romans worshiped the same gods, but they called it Zeus Father. And father in Latin is pater, like padre in Spanish or père in French. So if you think Zeus pater and imagine saying that with an Italian accent over and over again, perhaps you can see how Zeus pater over time became Jupiter. And that is Zeus, essentially. But let me show you the other planet that is right next door, Saturn. Now, this is a cool pairing because this does not happen frequently. If you know Saturn and Jupiter as planets, they have very long orbits around the sun. It takes Jupiter roughly 12 years to go around the sun just once, 12 times longer than our planet does. And it takes Saturn almost 30 years to make one orbit. So if you think about those planets, Jupiter is the fast one compared to Saturn, almost twice, I mean, more than twice as fast as far as an observer from Earth would say. And they do meet up along the zodiac line, the ecliptic line, the horoscope line. You can watch other episodes of our night sky if you want to know more about that. I can always go back and explain it, but notice how close that is to the claws of the Scorpion, or the head of Champ and Antares. Scorpius is a zodiac constellation. Here's the zodiac line. And the planets are always very close to the zodiac line. So that's another thing that looking at two planets can illustrate for you. But this one takes 12 years to make a trip around the sky through the zodiac from our earthbound perspective. Think about that, 12 years. There's 12 constellations in the Greek zodiac that we use in astronomy and astrology. 12 constellations, 12 years. That means that Jupiter goes through each of the constellations of the zodiac every year. It's sort of like a king visiting his provinces, you know, going from one province to another, inspecting his realm, you could say. So Jupiter has this regal appearance. It's very bright. Venus is the only planet that can ever be brighter than Jupiter. So think about that. Venus, the goddess of love, is the brightest, but Jupiter is the other brightest planet. But it has this slow progression, and it takes it 12 years to circle the zodiac. Well, Saturn takes 30 years to do the same. And this is, to me, what probably inspired the naming of these planets. So bear with me. This may be sounding a little bit weird, but Saturn is the Romans' name. And unlike Zeus, Pater, Jupiter, the name Saturn does not reflect what the Greeks called this planet because the name is so different. But if you know Greek mythology, you know that Saturn is Kronos. Kronos. That's the father of Zeus. He is the mad Titan. Before there was a Thanos, there was a Kronos, And Kronos in the Greek mythology was the evil titan who tried to swallow all of his children. I'm not going to go into all the details, but he swallowed most of the Olympian gods, Zeus's older brothers and sisters, including Poseidon and Hades and Hestia and Hera. They were all inside the belly of their own father because he heard a prophecy that his children would take his power. They would destroy his power. One of his children would defeat him one day, and he would no longer be the Titan king of the universe, and his son would take over, or his daughter, of course. But because of that prophecy, Kronos ate all of his children as soon as they were born. But his wife, another Titan named Rhea, was tired of seeing her husband eat her children. So when baby Zeus, the last to be born, was born, she did not let her husband Kronos see him. She disguised a rock with a diaper and made it look like a baby and baby bunting and swaddling. And then she presented that rock, weighing about the same as a newborn baby Olympian god. And when Kronos swallowed that rock, he didn't even bother to check if it was a baby or not. He didn't care. He quickly swallowed that rock. He thought, I've eaten the last of my children. But really, Zeus was left alive. And Rhea entrusted his care to others so that Kronos would never find out about him. No, it didn't happen on planet Tatooine. But can you see the connections in this story? Zeus is raised to be a warrior, raised to be powerful, all outside of the view of his father, who doesn't even know he still exists. And then when he's a strong young god, he goes and confronts his father and defeats his father, and, not to get into gory details, releases his brothers and sisters from his dad's belly. And a lot of other things happen that I'm not going to go into. But the point is, Kronos is the Dark Father. Or is there a better name for this? The Darth Vader? Sorry, just had to grab something as a shout out. Thanks to my mom, I got this as a joke Father's Day gift, a very funny t-shirt, a tank top that has Darth Vader holding up a sign saying, #1 dad. Well, it would be similarly ironic to have a picture of Kronos holding up a sign saying #1 dad during ancient Greek times, because he was considered to be an evil father, and his virtuous son, Zeus, came along and defeated him, and then restored order, and the Olympian gods took over, and the New Republic. No, just kidding. I'm sorry. I'm a big Star Wars fan in addition to loving astronomy, but you can see how they inspire each other. Apologize for the dogs barking. But so Kronos, Saturn, is like the original Darth Vader. Zeus is like the original Luke Skywalker. And they do battle, and the old Titan loses, and the new young god takes over. This is part of Greek mythology, this transfer of power. And you can see this happening in the sky. You could say the confrontation is happening this summer. So how often does this happen? About once every 12 years, because Jupiter is the one that really pretty much determines the schedule. Saturn takes 30 years to move through the zodiac. So you might have to wait half your lifetime, 30 years, to see Saturn accomplish that one trip. So you could say that this summer is the time when the evil father will be defeated by the virtuous son, whether it's Luke and Darth or Zeus and Kronos. Now, one last thing. Saturn, that's the Romans' name for Kronos, but Saturn and Kronos have another identity. Besides being titans, besides being the fathers of Zeus, they were the gods associated with the harvest. Kronos was the harvester. He was the one who knew when it was time to harvest your crops. So he was associated with time. Kronos. Think chronological order. Think synchronizing your phone with your laptop. Synchronized swimming. Have you ever read a chronicle? Chronic diseases that last a long time. Chronic, Kronos. It's all connected. So Kronos, time, father time, because he's associated with harvesting, he's always depicted holding a scythe. I even have one down in the barn. I'm not going to grab it now, but a scythe for reaping the wheat that you sowed in the spring. Reaping what you sow. Well, if you reap, you are the reaper. And Kronos is the original identity of death, the Grim Reaper, time. That's his provenance. I mean, that's his province. That's what he governs in the world of the Greeks and the Romans. So he also takes his sweet time, being the slowest moving of all the planets that you can see with the naked eye. So remember that there are 5 planets you can see in the sky besides the Earth, of course. You can see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. Until telescopes were invented, no one knew about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, of course. But since Saturn is the slowest planet, it may be an indication that's why they named it that. He was slow, or maybe because he was defeated by his son, he was debilitated in his ability to travel through the sky. So he was a weakened, slowed enemy, the old man defeated by the young upstart. So I'm sorry for going into all these crazy connections, but I hope you realize that learning the sky connects you to anything else that you want to know. Learning about planets like Jupiter and Saturn connects you to the oldest stories known. And if you follow the Cassini mission, you will see the latest science about Saturn that happened with that incredibly historic mission that orbited around that planet for almost a decade. And then if you look on NASA's website, you can learn about the Juno mission that is currently orbiting Jupiter right now. And the stuff that Juno is finding in Jupiter with its infrared cameras and its radar is giving us a lot of information about the layers that we can never see with our own eyes underneath the clouds of Jupiter. So what I love about these planets, and we'll talk more about them as the summer goes on, is that whether you learn the mythological connections, they're fascinating. When you learn the scientific discoveries that are coming from the planets themselves, it's even weirder than mythology, the stuff that we're learning about Saturn and Jupiter. So stay tuned if you want to learn more about these planets. It just started pouring rain outside, giving me a hint that tonight is probably not going to be the night to see the stars. But if you stay up on a clear night after midnight, you will definitely get to see Saturn and Jupiter for the next couple of weeks. And if you stay up till 1, you'll also get to see that waxing gibbous moon. But then you'll probably lose sight of the Milky Way. So I hope the weather cooperates with your stargazing plans, but whatever your plans are, thank you for joining me for this weekly update. I'll be back on next Thursday, and keep looking up. Take care, everyone.